In a new job, the users will select the menu item from the total agility menu, navigate down to the batch create form, and they will then be prompted to enter some information: year, type of batch, cache source, and some batch summary. The batch is going to be for 3068.96. Then we are going to have two checks in the batch here. We'll then scan, and we will scan this job here. We will then scan another job. Notice that had the effect of creating two transactions or two separate envelopes, each one representing a separate envelope received in the mail. And now we have two documents that are ready to be processed. We'll now create the job, and that is the batch creation process. Document identification. In this stage, the user is able to identify or confirm the results from the transformation server classification and separation. In this example, we can see that the system correctly identified and separated the policy, the check, and the envelope, and created a separate document for each within this transaction. At this point, the user should be able to complete the job. However, they do have some other options. They can cancel the job, which will put it back into the work queue. Complete the job, we'll advance it to the next one. We can also escalate the job if there's some problem with this job that the user cannot complete. They can escalate it to one of the team leads. Or if there is a document that's missing and they can identify that, they can run it to the QC quality control, where the system will provide the ability to rescan, replace, or add new pages to this batch so that it can be complete. And that's the end of this module. Data correction. Here we can see where Total Agility did perform some data extraction activities to extract different pieces of information. We can see here that on the check, we have some information that requires user intervention, as we do with the envelope. However, the policy looks to be okay. If we can go back and look at the policy, we can see that we read some information that is provided using the QR code. We use this value to then pull back important information that's related to this policy from the customer system. And now all we need to do is confirm the information that was automatically extracted from the check and from the envelope. This is a critical piece of information, as the postmark on the envelope helps determine when the payment was received and whether the payment was on time, or if there might be some late fees incurred as a result of check being sent late. In this case, we're just flagging it for accuracy. And then we're going to complete the job and move it forward to the next step, which is the check processing in Deposit 21. Deposit 21 check services allows us to correct and validate any check information that was extracted by the system. The system is set up to extract check amounts and also to extract the MICR date. When there are any issues to be looked at, the system will present the user with the information to correct, and the user will then be prompted for information. In this case, we will simply enter the check amount. Our system is configured for dual key to ensure that the system data is accurate. And so we will have to key the information multiple times. Again, that's based on a configuration. That configuration is not required for the system. It just happens to be in our case. And that is Deposit 21. Our job is now headed back into KTA, where it should be moving forward in the process into the research activity. Check batch balancing is a form that allows a user to correct any batches that are out of balance. In this example, we had indicated at batch creation that we were expecting to have 2 checks. However, as you can see from the batch, we actually have 3 separate checks, which is displayed here in that actual check amount. Similarly, we entered an expected checks total of $5,000, but the sum of all checks listed in the batch is $3,096.68. So the operator has the opportunity to review each one of those jobs to make sure there's no missing checks. When they select any one of the transactions, they can see any jobs that might have had any problems along the way. We have the ability to also display everything in the batch, not just the checks. So here we can see all policies, envelopes, etc. Finally, the user has the ability to correct and override the original values. To override the expected amount, we can just simply replace that with a 3. So now those two items will match. To override the amount, we can either add a new amount for the check. So we'll do 1548.34. And since we still don't match, we will want to match it to this 464502, 4645.02. At this point, everything is in sync, everything matches up. We have the number of checks matches the actual, the expected amount matches the actual. We are now ready to complete this job and release the transaction batches, further processing downstream. The research form allows the users to ensure that the amounts distributed and applied to the policy are accurate, and that upon completion, this particular transaction will be available for deposit to the bank. In this case, we have here in this smaller section a listing of all the checks that are part of that transaction, the check number, an indicator of whether the check should be deposited or not, as well as the amount for the check. Down here, we have some of the checks. If there are any notes that have been provided assigned to the job along the way, they are listed here. So any communication, any indications identified by users along the way would be visible here and as a form of communication. Down here in this table down here, we have a listing of each policy that is related to this particular transaction. We have all the information here in a tabular view, so if the users can quickly scan it. Here you will note the more important item is that the check was correctly automatically distributed. We found a check number. This particular policy has a amount due of $1548.34. That is what this check is for, and so we automatically matched it. In this example, this particular policy could have skipped this step because we have a match. We are simply forcing a step in this case for a second set of eyes. A couple more things that we can do here. We can actually show the policy in the viewer as a separate item. We can pop it up in a different form. We also can look up additional policies in case we want to bring in and pay for and incorporate some additional ones that are maybe out there if the check had a balance. But some of the other things that we can do is we can, in cases where we do have some questions and we can't resolve, we have the ability to call this a check by phone. So we need to call the customer and get the check via phone. We can route it to the division. We can put it on hold. We can send it back to our rescanning, request a new check. We can return a check for zero balance. So we have several routing options here to handle any potential issues that may occur along the way. Once the policy matches, once the check sum matches the distribution sum, we can complete the job, and that will send it to Deposit 21 clearing services and queue it up for deposit. So we're going to do that now. In cases where the automatic distribution rules were unable to correctly distribute the amounts from the check and apply them to policies, we have a facility here that allows us to take the amount of check and distribute it amongst the different policies to apply some amount of the check in order so we can get the check deposited. So what we'll do here is we'll simply say we're going to do 500 from that check to this policy, 500 from that check to that policy, and for this last policy we'll do 548.34. That will take up all of the funds for the check. And now that we have a zero balance effectively, we can kind of go ahead and complete the job. Again, this completing the job will move it into the Deposit 21 clearing service activity, which will be going to be next. Deposit 21 clearing service allows us to take a look at the items that are currently waiting to be submitted for deposit. In our case, we had those two checks for a total of $3,096.68. At the time that we want to deposit, we can effectively force a cutoff. When we force a cutoff, the system is going to start by moving the transaction forward. First, we'll do some formatting, then we'll encrypt it, then we'll transmit it. We'll wait for confirmation back from the bank that the transmission's been received. Then we'll request a deposit confirmation, a receipt confirmation, and a deposit confirmation. And only when all of those things happen will we release the job to move on forward to the accounting system. So we are now going to go ahead and perform a cutoff. Cutting the cutoff will tell us that we're going to clear everything through an ICL file. There are multiple clearing routes. There's the image cache letter, which is the ICL, and there's also paper routing, and there's any number of different options for checks that don't meet the criteria. In our case, our checks did, so we're going to simply force the cutoff. Again, that is an indication that we're going to submit the job for deposit. And if we navigate back to the dashboard, we can see where the job is actually moving along the different steps in the process. So right now it's in the transmit. We're receiving confirmation of transmission. After this, once we receive that confirmation, we are going to get a confirmation for receipt. And then next, we're going to get a deposit confirmation. And at this point in time, this is an indication that our deposit has been accepted by the bank. The checks have been received, they've been accepted, and they should be in the process of being deposited. In the meantime, our job is now free to move forward to update the accounting system.